5 days barefoot on sharp rocks, yet not a single scratch was found on her soles. But Harper did not know that yet. At that moment, she only knew the warmth of the fire on her shins and the comforting, rhythmic snoring of Marcus from the tent behind her. It was 11:42 p.m. on a Tuesday in the deep backcountry of the Canadian Rockies. The air was crisp, smelling of pine resin and the lingering wood smoke that clung to her fleece. Harper, a 23-year-old environmental science major, was not the type to take risks. She was the one who double-checked the bear canisters. She was the one who cross-referenced the topographical maps. She was the anchor of the group. She stood up, brushing ash from her leggings, intending only to walk the short path to the designated latrine area, a mere 70 meters away. She slipped her feet out of her heavy hiking boots to stretch her toes, enjoying the cool dampness of the moss. She would not need boots for a 2-minute walk. She took her headlamp, clicking it to the low red setting to preserve her night vision. That was when she saw it. It was not a sound. The forest was alive with the standard nocturnal chorus of crickets and wind shifting the spruce branches. It was a visual anomaly. About 30 yards off the trail, deep in a dense thicket of lodgepole pine, something shimmered. It was not the reflection of animal eyes. That would be a distinct green or yellow twin orb reflection. This was a vertical, oscillating distortion, like heat rising from asphalt, but colored with a faint, impossible violet hue. Harper frowned. Her analytical mind immediately tried to categorize it. Gas leak? Bioluminescence? A trick of the fatigue lens? She took a step toward it, leaving the packed dirt of the trail. The moss felt spongy and cold under her bare arches. Just a look, she thought. I'll check the perimeter and be right back. It was an irrational impulse, a magnetic pull that bypassed her survival instincts entirely. She moved past the first line of trees. The moment she crossed that invisible threshold, the world broke. The sound cut out. It did not fade. It was severed. The wind died. The crickets were silenced. The snoring from the tent, which should have been audible from this distance, vanished. The silence was heavy, pressurized, plugging her ears like she had just dived to the bottom of a deep pool. Harper spun around, heart hammering against her ribs, expecting to see the orange glow of the campfire through the trees. There was no fire. There were no tents. There was no moon. The soft moss beneath her feet was gone. In the red beam of her headlamp, the ground had transformed. Stretching out before her in every direction was a vast, undulating field of shale, jagged, razor-sharp slabs of black rock that looked like broken teeth jutting from the earth. The trees were different now, too. They were taller, their bark smooth and gray, devoid of needles, looming like skeletal sentinels. "Marcus," she whispered. Her voice sounded flat, deadened by the heavy air. "Jessica." She took a step back, trying to retreat to where the camp should be. Her bare foot came down on the edge of a slate shard. She flinched, expecting the sharp bite of stone slicing skin, the wet warmth of blood. She gasped, waiting for the pain, but she felt nothing. Panic, cold and liquid, flooded her chest. She shone her light frantically. North, south, east, west, it was all the same. An infinite boneyard of sharp rocks and gray pillars. The violet shimmer was gone. She was alone in a silent void, barefoot, with no way home. She had to move. She had to find the trail. She turned and began to run into the dark, her bare feet slapping against the cruel, cutting stones. Harper ran until her lungs burned like swallowed acid. She ran until the red light of her headlamp began to dim, flickering with the cadence of a dying battery. Logic told her she should be leaving a trail of blood. The terrain was a nightmare of geology, obsidian flakes and flint edges that should have shredded her soles to ribbons within 50 yards. Yet, she felt only the impact, the hard jarring of bone against stone, but never the sting of a cut. She stopped when the darkness became absolute. The headlamp died. She was plunged into a blackness so total it felt solid, pressing against her eyeballs. She sank to her knees, her hands grasping the cold, sharp rocks. "Help!" she croaked. The word fell from her lips and died instantly in the stillness. Time began to dissolve. Was it hours? Days? The sky never lightened. There was no sun, no stars. Just a uniform, oppressive gray ceiling that offered no warmth. Harper kept moving because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant screaming until her mind snapped. She navigated by touch, crawling over the shale, her fingers tracing the knife edges of the stone. She was thirsty, but her throat did not parch. She was hungry, but her stomach did not cramp. It was as if her biology had been suspended, frozen in the moment she stepped off the trail. The only thing that grew was the terror. It started with the sensation of being watched. Not by eyes, but by a consciousness. The air around her grew heavy, smelling of ozone and wet, musk-heavy fur. She would freeze, straining her ears against the unnatural silence. Snap! A sound. Real, distinct sound. Came from behind her. It sounded like a heavy footfall on the shale. Harper scrambled forward, her breathing ragged. Snap! Crunch! It was following her. It was not rushing. It was matching her pace, a predatory mimicry. When she crawled, it moved slowly. When she scrambled, the crunching accelerated. She was not hunting for a way out anymore. She was being herded. "What do you want?" she screamed into the black. No answer. Just a low, vibrating hum that seemed to resonate in her teeth. It was a sound of amusement. She scrambled up a ridge of slate, her bare feet finding purchase on edges that should have sliced them to the bone. She reached the top, hoping for a landmark, a light, anything. Below her, in a valley that should not exist, she saw the violet light again. It was pulsing, rhythmic, like a heartbeat, and in the center of the light stood a silhouette. It was tall, impossibly tall, perhaps 9 or 10 feet, thin, with limbs that had too many joints. Harper tried to back away, but her legs gave out. She did not faint from exhaustion. She was shut down. A wave of lethargy washed over her, a psychic command to sleep. As her consciousness faded, the last thing she registered was the crunch of heavy footsteps closing the distance, and the terrifying realization that she had not been lost. She had been collected. The sound of the rotor blades was violent enough to rattle her teeth. It was the loudest thing Harper had ever heard. "We have a pulse. BP is 90/60. She is catatonic but responsive to pain stimuli. The voice was distorted, shouting over the mechanical roar. Harper's eyes snapped open. Blinding blue sky. The smell of aviation fuel. The rough texture of a canvas strap across her chest. She was in a basket, being hoisted into a yellow helicopter. She thrashed, a scream tearing from her throat, but a gloved hand pressed her down firmly. "It's okay, Harper. We've got you. You're safe." Safe. The word meant nothing. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the gray trees, the violet light, the tall thing. But there was only the vibration of the engine and the radio chatter. 6 hours later, she was in a trauma room at Calgary General Hospital. The fluorescent lights buzzed with a harsh, electric reality. Dr. Evans, a trauma specialist with 20 years of experience, stood at the foot of her bed. He was holding a clipboard, his brow furrowed so deeply it looked painful. 2 nurses stood by, whispering, casting glances at Harper's legs. "Harper, Dr. Evans said, his voice gentle but laced with a profound confusion. "Do you know what day it is?" Harper stared at the ceiling. "Friday," she whispered. "It's Sunday," Evans said. "You've been missing for 5 days." The search radius was expanded to 50 kilometers. "They found you 12 kilometers from your campsite, in a ravine that search and rescue said was inaccessible without climbing gear." Harper turned her head slowly. "I walked," she rasped. "I walked on the rocks. It was dark. Sharp rocks. Everywhere." Dr. Evans looked at the nurses, then pulled back the sterile blue sheet covering Harper's lower half. "Harper, look at your feet." Harper pushed herself up on her elbows. She expected to see ruin. She expected bandaged stumps, shredded skin, necrotic tissue from frostbite and infection. She braced herself for the horror of her own mutilated body. Her feet were pale, clean, and perfect. There was not a single cut, not a callus, no bruising. The skin was soft, unblemished, pink with healthy circulation. The nails were intact. They looked like the feet of someone who had spent the last week in bed, not traversing 12 kilometers of rugged, slate-covered wilderness barefoot. "This is medically impossible, Dar," Evans muttered, more to himself than to her. "The terrain out there. You should have lost your feet. You should not even be able to stand. But there is not even a microscopic abrasion. It's like you never touched the ground." Harper stared at her pristine soles. A wave of nausea hit her, stronger than the fear in the woods. The memory of the pain, the phantom pain of stepping on the jagged rocks, clashed with the visual reality. "I felt them," she whispered, tears spilling over. "I felt the rocks. I walked for days." "Physiologically, you did not," Evans said, shaking his head. "There is no dirt in your pores. No plant matter. Nothing. You are perfectly clean." The room spun. If she had not walked, then how did she get there? The gap between her memory and the physical evidence was a chasm, and down in that darkness, something terrible was waiting to be acknowledged. The hospital room was quiet at 3:00 a.m., lit only by the glow of the heart monitor. Harper lay awake, staring at the window. Outside, the city lights of Calgary created an orange haze, but in the reflection of the glass, she saw the darkness of the woods. She pulled her knees to her chest and grabbed her left foot. She ran her thumb over the arch. Smooth, soft, and used. The truth hit her not as a thought, but as a sensory flashback. The dam in her mind broke, sweeping away the false memory she had constructed to protect her sanity. She had not been walking. She closed her eyes and the real memory surfaced, vivid and suffocating. She remembered stepping off the trail. She remembered the silence. But she did not remember walking. She remembered being lifted. She gasped in the quiet room, her hand clutching her foot tight enough to turn the skin white. She had been paralyzed, rigid as a board, and it had been holding her. The tall, gray silhouette. It had not been following her. It had been carrying her. She remembered the sensation of being suspended 6 feet in the air, floating through the gray trees. She remembered the smell. Not just musk, but something ancient like rotting copper. She remembered looking down, unable to move her head, watching the razor-sharp rocks pass beneath her, feet dangling inches above the destruction. She had not felt the rocks cutting her. She had felt the threat of them. The creature had carried her for 5 days, moving her from place to place, hovering her over the danger, letting her terror marinate. It had fed her fear, keeping her conscious but immobile. Why? She looked at her feet again. They were trophies. It had kept them perfect. It had preserved her, protected her from the elements, from the cold, from the terrain. It was not a predator hunting for meat. It was a collector protecting a specimen. And then the final memory unlocked. The release. She remembered the helicopter approaching, the noise breaking the silence. The creature had not fled in panic. It had gently, almost lovingly, lowered her onto the moss in the ravine. It had leaned close, its face a blur of shifting static, and whispered a sound that was not a language, but a promise. It let her go because it was not finished. Harper looked at the window reflection again. The glass was cold. She was not safe here. The walls, the doctors, the lights, it was all just a temporary cage. The creature had not lost her. It had tagged her. It had returned her to the world of men pristine and unmarked to show its power. To show that it could take her, break her mind, and put her back together without leaving a fingerprint. She pulled the sheet up, covering her flawless, terrible feet. She knew she would never go into the woods again. But as she watched the shadows in the corner of the hospital room lengthen and twist, Harper realized with a chilling clarity that she did not need to go back to the woods. The woods had come back with her.